welcome to Hamburg. It's a pleasure to have you here, and a big honor to have you here on this festival, because you're one of the few legends that are here this time. You know, like everybody has heard of your music or heard your music. So
thank you very much. Well, we were here not too long ago. I think 2 years ago. We played with my trio. I was doing like a little tour. I did 6 cities in Germany, and one of them was Hamburg, and it was Fabrik that I played at. It was very nice. Many friends, many fans know my music. And but it was overnight, and then next day, boom! I went to Heidelberg, something like that. This is the first time we have a chance to look around, and we're doing this. Is amazing. I'm very happy. It's such a beautiful place. We seriously talking, because I'm kind of tired of living in outside. We live outside New York. We're looking for a place which is there's some kind of a vibe in the air, with a happiness vibe, a vibration, some kind of a energy vibe. I found this in here, which is very interesting, and we discussed this.
I thought that New York was a great place for musicians to get a lot of inspiration, to get a lot of exchange with other musicians. I mean, I thought it was the place to be.
We moved out. I moved out of New York for about 16 years ago. No more Manhattan. I live outside 1 hour outside.
Anyway, you started your career in the 70s, and you made your big hit, Also sprach Zarathustra. And, you know, everybody knows you from that time in the 70s, and you were like well known for doing this kind of melange between several styles, which is jazz, funk, fusion. You know, they called it fusion at that time.
Yes.
So after that, how did your career develop after this big hit? What was important for you to do after that?
Well, there were a lot of requests for me to play and to go places. In that case, in the 70s, I put together a 10-piece band, and I was traveling mostly in the United States. Like sometimes universities, tours of universities, sometimes 20, 30, 40 universities. So I have to go from Ohio to Cleveland to, then I go to California, then I go to Texas. It was very tiring, and also very expensive. It came to a point where I said, I just don't want to do this anymore. I'm not a player. I never learned piano in my life. I'm an arranger. I like to do arrangements, mostly for singers or even for bands, for orchestra. So I can write for a trio. I can write for a 120-piece symphony orchestra. I have a record that I did with the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra, which is called, what's the name of the record? It's about artistry. It's called Artistry. And it was the Symphony Orchestra. Very nice album. I wrote pieces. Right now I have, in 1 month, I have a concert in Lugano, Switzerland, with the Symphony Orchestra of Lugano and my band of 9-piece now, which comes from Bologna, mostly. The best musicians I could find.
This brings me to the question, you have an affinity with classical music. This is why you arrange for orchestras. And you living in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro first, or initially, how did you get in touch with this kind of classical music? What was your upbringing in that way, or your education?
Classical music always fascinated me, but the reason why I started with classical music is because my mother took me to a piano teacher, and I brought with me a Debussy piece called Clair de Lune, and I said, I came because I want to learn to play Clair de Lune. I love the song. And she laughed. Ha, 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 ha. I said, why are you laughing? Ha, ha, ha. You have to start with this clang, 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 clang. I don't like that. Oh, but you have to start. I said, no, I don't want to go there. So I was crying. My mother never took me there again. And I stayed at home. I sat on the piano. I started learning. I bought a record, and I listened, and I started playing. And after maybe 3 months, I was able to play. That's my start with classical music. But I always liked classical, especially with symphony orchestras.
So how? I mean, there's a long way from a piano player to an arranger. Is that something that you have to study, or did that come naturally?
I started my first record that I did in my life. I did all the orchestrations, all the arrangements, and I also played piano. I was 17 years old. It was my first job. It's very unusual for someone to do arranging early, because that's something that comes, you're right. It comes after a certain development, but I got it upside down. I started first arranging. It was a small orchestra, not big, but it was a thing. And the guy who wrote the back notes on the record, it was a Brazilian composer that since that day he became my friend and my fan. His name was Antonio Carlos Jobim. He wrote a phrase very famous, because Deodato means God given. And he said, look at how much God has given Deodato. That's what he wrote. Thank you.
So, you're doing this still. You said that you had several projects with symphony orchestras, but now you're here in Hamburg, and
Yes.
you're gonna do or perform with a small band. And those are Hamburg people that you just met recently while you were
Absolutely.
here. So how's it working with these guys, and what do they bring in, being Hamburg musicians?
Well, they're fine. I had a small rehearsal with them the other day, the day after I arrived, and I had communication over the Skype or internet with Roland Cabezas, who's the leader of the guys, and also with Simon, the keyboard player. He's going to play most of the horn parts on the keyboard, so we're going to have probably the same keyboard, but I'm going to play the Fender Rhodes, and he's going to play the horns and the strings. There was a phase in music where a certain sound stopped, and then in the 90s, they called me the father of the acid jazz. I don't know why, but they did. So I don't know why the acid jazz. What it was? There's some name that came out of England, you know.
What I wanted to ask is, when you perform with these guys now, the Hamburg guys, who I've known as fine studio musicians and also as big band musicians, parts of them, like Roland, the guitar player,
Yes.
or Fiete, the saxophone player, they are big band musicians. What can one expect? Is it some kind of funky music, or?
Yeah, well, yes, it's a fusion funk, some Brazilian flavor, Latin, a little rock for the guitar solos, and Latin, you know, really, Latin and fusion, mostly funk. Yes, of course, always funk. I was involved with many funk groups. I produced many funk groups, such as Kool and the Gang. So that's what I do. But you know, and I'm playing is a pleasure. I do have invitations from different parts of the world, and a lot of it has to do with, when I said Hamburg, I said, I've been there and I never had a chance to see it. This time I want to ask for a couple more days, and that's what I did.